Hey, everybody. Just going to give another minute here for everybody to join as Conte takes care of all of the various bots and things that like to join us as well. We'll just give it another minute. Okay, everybody, it is a few minutes after the hour, so I do think we will get started. For those of you who have just joined, welcome to this week's GFAN call. We do have, well, as usual, we do have an agenda for you, which we hope you'll find interesting. Maybe that's why you're here. But we are going to hear from the co-authors of the recent scope report. I'll give a bit of an overview of that. And then we want to focus on the World Health Summit, which is starting up with activities on Saturday and Sunday, with the conference going through next Tuesday. And there's a lot of different sort of side meetings and other focuses around the conference as usual. So we wanted to just give a quick little update around our activities and other key activities there for GFANers who may be able to attend to consider. And we also wanted to just I'm not sure what to call it, but after what has happened in France this week, we wanted to give a quick word to our colleagues from France to come in about some of the implications, early thoughts about implications of yet another governmental change in France. And I think it might have set a world record for minimum time for a government to actually be set, but I'm not sure about that. But we'll get to that. So just as a reminder, as always, we are recording the call and we do post the call and any other resources to our website. That we do not allow colleagues to have their AI bots join us during the call, but we do share those recordings so that you are able to catch up if you miss a part or you want to go back to anything. And just a reminder that we do have French interpretation for colleagues here on the call. And so you can find that by looking for the translation button. Usually it looks like a little globe icon at the bottom of the screen, and a reminder to all of us then in terms of our participation to speak as slowly as possible and as clearly as possible and to introduce yourself before or after any questions that we may have later on in the call to make it easier for our wonderful interpreters who we welcome back again today. So I am going to get us started. In the first agenda item, we wanted to bring the colleagues who had led on the scope report. And as some of you might recall, back in mid-2024, I think it was, the Global Fund had issued a report around civil society sort of funding through the Global Fund. And I think there was a sense from that it was a welcome sort of publication. It had never sort of been a published piece of information sort of prior to that, or with that sort of extent of depth and research. But there was a sense that there was something a little bit missing in that report from the Global Fund. And a number of colleagues, I think GFAN was involved in some of the very early conversations. But some of the colleagues wanted to get a bit more granular, and lucky for all of us, Jennifer Sherwood and Alana Sharp took up that call. And so their report looks again at sort of those overall funding numbers, and it makes a series of really interesting recommendations and also provides some tools for colleagues who will be advocating, at the CCM level and beyond for community-led organization sort of funding as subrecipients and sub-recipients to the Global Fund, also providing us our very newest fun acronym, SCOPE being the support for community organizations and priorities for empowerment and impact. So to talk about that, I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer and Alana now. So I think Jennifer, perhaps over to you first, but it could be Alana. So over to you. Thank you for joining us today to share
Thanks
about
so
this.
much, Katie. Good to be here. And thanks for, yeah, the acronym shout out. I was gonna probably have to look it up myself, so I'm glad that you know it. Yeah, it's great to be here with you all. Yes, as Katie mentioned, this was a study that grew out of um, a big collaboration, and I'm here with Alana today to share some of those results. But next slide, if you don't mind, Alana. Um, but this was a big study that had a large advisory group from a bunch of organizations listed here who really helped develop the methodology, helped steer us to asking the right questions, and then also um, included participation from 113 community members from many world regions who participated in the consultations and surveys to help guide us along the way. So you can download the full report here, and we can drop the link in the chat too. That's available online only in English right now, but we're working on other languages. So please do feel free to grab that QR code. Great. Okay, next slide, Alana. Thanks so much. So the scope study really grew out of a few key questions. We wanted to understand the current landscape of community-led organizations as recipients at the Global Fund. So to do that, we had to do a few things first. First was really define what we meant by community-led organization, and this was done through a series of 6 virtual consultations across many regions to help and have folks really define what we as community members thought were some defining characteristics of a CLO. And then to take a look at the Global Fund programs and say which of these really should be implemented by CLOs. And this was also done through community consultation. And then Alana really led this part, taking a look at current data that was available from the Global Fund to map out principal recipient type and level. And we asked folks to also assess the CLOs or assess the PRs in their own countries to figure out which of those PRs were CLOs and which were other civil society types. And then we did a deep dive into some case studies at the subrecipient level and really asked about facilitators and barriers to community-led implementation, as well as the big one, which was how we can really strengthen what the opportunities we have to strengthen community-led implementation in the next grant cycle. So these are the main questions, and we had a few different methodologies to answer them. So maybe next slide. Thanks. So you can find all of this information in a lot more detail in the report, and the annexes do detail out everything, even if it's not fully in the report. So we, through consultations, created a community definition of a CLO. Since the Global Fund, their own PR types do have a civil society category, but they don't break it down into CLO within that larger civil society category. So they've got local and international distinctions, but not all the way down to community-led. And so through consultation, we came up with a definition, or at least some defining characteristics that CLOs must have to be counted. There were things like where the organization was registered and based, whether community members were in leadership. Oh, so sorry, I'm going too fast. Yes, we had a few defining characteristics, including where the organization was based, registration, the staffing, leadership, board, what proportions of leadership and staffing came from the community. So there were a lot of recommendations for what we might consider to be a community-led organization. We think that this definition could be useful not only for the Global Fund to help to redefine in those in that larger PR civil society category, which orgs might be CLO versus community based, and also to advocate for more CLO presence, both as PRs and SSRs, especially for running programs that would be best suited for a community-led organization. Next slide. Thank you. So what we did next was through a large global survey, we took this definition of CLO and we asked people in their own country to let us know through survey if those PRs counted for them as a CLO or not. Take a look at all their civil society PRs. So the data on this slide, everything outside of that box, the CLO community-led organization box, is data that comes from the Global Fund. And this is the number and proportion of principal recipients in each Global Fund category. The figure 2A there is the number of PRs, and then 2B is the proportion of the budget which went to that PR type. So of course you can see Ministry of Health being the largest recipient there, but you've got all other PR types there, and certainly a lean towards international organizations. What we added here from the scope study was what proportion were actually community-led principal recipients. And we found that between like 6 and 8% were of PRs would be counted as community-led organizations based on our definition, depending on which grant cycle you're looking at, and between 5 and around that, between 5.8 and 7.8% of funding was going to community-led organizations at the PR level. Next slide. So here, we just to put a point on this, here's really how we got to these numbers, and you could take a closer look at this figure in the report. But all of those boxes in yellow most of them are from the Global Fund, and what we added was that last box, that little gray box, which shows what proportion of orgs were CLOs amongst a bunch of categories. So if you just track along with me here, you can see that among all PRs, about 37% were civil society, our civil society. Of those, you've got 45, which are local orgs. So that's 18% of all PRs and 48% of civil society. And then among civil society, we break that down into community-based organizations, non-governmental organizations, and faith-based organizations. And those are still Global Fund numbers. And then we further looked at what of those are actually community-led, and that was through consultation and survey. And so you can see how we got to all those numbers there. Next slide. So in addition to the definition of CLOs and what proportion of PRs were CLOs, we also asked in consultation what programs of the Global Fund must be led by CLOs, which would be better suited for CLOs versus other civil society organization types. So we fully understand that the Global Fund partnership, that there's a role for so many different organization types of governments and other technical partners. But we asked, which modules, which activities and interventions should really be in the hands of community. And so one of our annexes here details which modules based on the existing lists really should be implemented fully or in part by community-led organizations. And we hope that this list can be useful for advocacy during grant making and reprioritization to help try to protect some of that, some of those activities that really should be in the hands of community. Okay. Oh, yes, and a call for acronyms to, yes, absolutely, sorry. well, I'm actually about to pass to Alana for the next part of the of the presentation, but I can type some of them in the chat. So thanks so much. On to you, Alana.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. So the second part of this is that after having defined what a CLO is, having mapped out the landscape at the PR level of which ones are community-led organizations, and having defined within the modular framework which activities should be implemented by CLOs, the next step was to look at what's happening at a more granular level because we know that the implementation of Global Fund grants happens at the subrecipient and the sub-subrecipient level. And so those data are not publicly available. And so we did some case studies in 3 countries to try to understand the landscape of who's doing what. And because we already had this list of which activities should be implemented by community-led organizations, we were able to speak with a variety of partners in each country and say who's doing the key population prevention program, who's doing the community system strengthening work, who's doing community-led monitoring at the SR and SSR level. And so some things that I think were very interesting that we found were that in these 3 cases, the government principal recipients don't subcontract to community-led organizations. The money stays within the government. And so all the funding to civil society PRs in this context went through the civil society PR only. And we see community-led organizations are more often implementers of key population-focused programs, but are less involved in malaria activities, services for adolescent girls and young women, condoms, and PrEP programs. We also saw something interesting, which is that the COVID-19 response mechanism, which was a temporary source of funding that is going away, was a major source of funding for community-led organizations and community priorities. So that's a risk that's coming up. And so we also spoke to people about their perceptions about serving as an SR. We find that there is a very strong feeling that community-led organizations are trusted implementers who are very good at reaching populations. The implementation through community organizations happen because some people are not well served by the public healthcare system. And so this was a very strong way of reaching people, of elevating the needs and advocating for community priorities and being a resource. And we heard that the politics of being selected is very challenging. The decisions happen at the CCM where it's not transparent. It's difficult to understand how choices are made. And there were difficult eligibility criteria where many small organizations were just not large enough or didn't have enough experience running large grants and were just not eligible. And this is particularly the case in countries where, for example, key population-led organizations can't legally register and so may be ineligible because of that. There was a lot about how there's a lack of overhead and administrative costs when you're an SR, so it's very hard to develop your organization, to manage your human resources as a community-led organization. Funds don't come in on time, there's not regular budgets, so it can be very financially challenging. And then lastly, we heard some organizations get capacity building from Global Fund, sometimes for many, many years. And there was a perception that that should become eventually you allowed to be an SR or to maybe find other sources of funding, but it felt like that capacity building went on and on. So I'll just say some recommendations we had. As Jennifer had said, the tracking of PRs is not granular enough. Civil society can include UN organizations, it can include private sector, includes everyone. And so we need more granularity to be able to track community-led implementation. Going into grant cycle 8, we think that the Global Fund and everyone should be using this list of activities to look at funding requests and say, if activities that should be implemented by CLOs are being implemented by government, for example, that should be a flag. So community-led monitoring needs to go to a CLO, that kind of thing. And so we're hoping that that Global Fund and others can be proactive in monitoring implementation arrangements. It's going to be a big, big challenge next cycle. All of us need to be prioritizing continuing the funding of community-focused programs, particularly when it becomes very challenging competing for other smaller and smaller resources. And the last one is about developing pathways for direct funding to CLOs, since many small organizations are not eligible to traditionally be contracted. There are serious legal and administrative barriers to serving as an SR or SSR. So we need to think about different strategies, particularly in countries where there is no civil society PR. So sorry, I don't know if we've gone way over, but I'll just say some things that we just shared with the board committees was, one is that there just are only, based on scope, there are only two ways to fund CLOs in Grant Cycle 8, either through civil society PRs or direct to community funding. And we need to protect one or both of those pathways, or all that funding seems like it's going to go away. So we're asking the board to create real pathways for directly funding communities. And as we said, we're really asking for proactive steps to make sure community funding is protected. So I think I will stop there. So I don't know if we have time for discussion, but please feel free to put in the chat, if this feels right to you, if we missed anything. And then, are there ways that we can be working together to move these messages forward in a very challenging Grant Cycle 8 environment. So thank you.
Thank you both very much for that. We do have a bit of time for questions. So I would just open it up for questions. If there's, just looking in the chat where my colleague Hita has been trying to keep up with the acronyms for colleagues on the call, but also just looking to see if there are any questions. I think, just thank you guys very much, and to all of those who sort of saw this report through, and made sure that there was, surveying and inclusive sort of methodology of colleagues working at the community level to get to these results. I think, in addition to what the Global Fund had published, for me, it feels very good. It feels like a more complete picture, if that makes sense. And I think it's really helpful to have the recommendations and the tools for advocacy ahead of sort of conversations at the country level, and to, for pushing why community-led organizations are the right kinds of leaders for programs at the country level in different contexts. Not everything, as you say in your report, but there are many areas where we're not doing a good enough job of making sure that those who should best lead are leading in that. Any questions? I'm just going to pause for a second. I'm not seeing any hands raised. I'm not seeing anything in the report other than a link to the sort of the full copy of the report. Okay, so thank you, Alana and Jennifer. Really appreciate it, and congratulations again to you and to everyone who supported the project to get it here. It's very exciting. And I see Peter Obidi's hand raised at the very last second. I'm sure he's been looking for that. So Peter, over to you for a quick question or comment.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for that survey. I'm interested to know if there was, did you find out who is building the capacity of those community-led organizations that have not yet matured enough to be SRs?
Yeah, Peter, I can answer that. I'm sure, and I know that there are many sources of.
Am I clear?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry if I cut you off. But I was just saying that there are many sources of capacity building and so on, but in this case, this was about global funds supporting capacity building. So there are some activities, global funds that are, organizational capacity buildings, community system strengthening, things like that. And oftentimes organizations feel like that's meant to prepare them to become an SR, but then 10 years pass and they're continuing to receive capacity building. And that was, a frustrating thing for people, that it didn't feel like there was an end in sight. But at the same time, many organizations felt like they wanted support to become stronger, to have more financial systems, administrative systems, to become bigger organizations. And so they wanted the funding to continue. So those were some of the things we found.
Thank you for that. And there is another question, so we'll take one
Yes,
last.
thank you very much. And
Sorry, Peter, were you trying to come in?
yes, that's the question. And it, the FR were building the capacity. Yeah, I'm just trying to add to it that the SRs, the example in Kenya, the SRs are building the capacity of community-led organizations, but they can't do it because they are also want to be SRs forever. So that is where the big gap is, and it's correct the way you.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good point because people spoke a lot about the politics to become an SR is extremely, extremely difficult. Sometimes you're not allowed to be on the CCM if you receive Global Fund money. Sometimes it happens very quietly, the decisions, and there's not an open call. And so the conflict of interest and the politics is a huge barrier to becoming funded by Global Fund.
Thank you both. There is one other question. So I just wanted to quickly give the floor to Christine for her question or comment, and another opportunity to Alana and Jennifer to address it before we move on in our agenda. So thank you both. Thank you, Peter, for that question and for the dialogue. Christine, over to you. We're not hearing you, Christine, if you're trying to unmute. Okay. Christine, unfortunately, we're not hearing you. So if I can suggest, please, just in terms of our agenda, if we can just ask you to take your question to the chat or to follow up by email, and we can try and make sure that Jennifer and Alana have an opportunity to respond to your question. So again, thank you, Alana and Jennifer. We're going to move on now just to look a little bit at the World Health Summit, but also a little bit about the German, what's happening in Germany at the same time as the World Health Summit in terms of Global Fund replenishment, pledging, etc. So I'm going to give the floor to my colleague Priyanka, first of all, just to share with you a little bit about sort of the activities and the guide that GFAN is creating for GFANers who are coming to or going to the World Health Summit. So Priyanka, over to you.
Thank you so much, Katie. So as you can see on the screen, Katie, I, and Quentin will be at the WHS. So in case you have any questions or would like to let us know about any of the side events that you might be doing, you have our email IDs. You can reach out to us and we look forward to hearing from you. We have a number of side sessions happening for GFANers at the WHS that won't happen at the Intercontinental, but at a venue that is walking distance from the Intercontinental to help you navigate whatever is happening at the WHS and on the sidelines of the WHS. We've created this guide. As soon as I'm done sharing my screen, I'll also post a link where you can access this guide on our website. But basically what you'll find here is all of the sessions where GFANers and other people of interest will be on the panel within the main schedule or the main programming of the World Health Summit. So we completely understand that, there are a few of us who are registered to be inside the room at the summit, and then there will be few of us who are in attendance who won't be engaging in the summit. So the first section is the sessions that are happening within the purview of the summit. And if you are registered, you will have access to all of these. So you might want to take a look at that. Apart from that, for all of you attending, we also have a WhatsApp group. There's a link available in the guide for all of us to connect on the WhatsApp group. If you are not yet sure that if you're going to be there or not, I would say hold off on joining on the WhatsApp group so that we don't spam you. And as soon as you have a confirmation that you're going to be at the World Health Summit, feel free to join. We'll keep the group open till the end of the World Health Summit, and we'll only close it after that. Apart from that, what we are doing, we have, as is customary for us, a pre-meeting, a GFANers pre-meeting. It will be really, really helpful if you could use the RSVP link here to let us know if you're going to be there. That helps us get a sense of the numbers and also plan the day accordingly. We also have a town hall scheduled with Peter Sands. Again, really helpful if you could please RSVP helps us in moving things along. Apart from that, there are some other invitation-only sessions happening that will be also at the same venue. In case you think this is something that you are interested in, feel free to drop us a line and we can see, depending upon the members available in the room, and we can send you an invitation accordingly. There are a few side events that are happening at the Intercontinental and are a part of the World Health Summit but require separate registration. They are not immediately open to everybody who has registered for the World Health Summit. So we culled out a few that we thought were interesting and have GFANers on the panel and have listed them here. In case you know of any other side events that are happening at the Intercontinental and would like us to mention them here, please do let us know. And apart from that, if you have a side event that's happening in Berlin around the World Health Summit on the sidelines and would like us to include that in this guide for GFANers, please do let us know and we can keep this live document as updated as possible. Apart from that, a few of you already know about the White Coats campaign that we have been running with the ITPC team over the past year. So in case you've ever been a part of the White Coats campaign or know what it is and have a white coat that you've already decked up in one of our previous GFAN meetings, please, please, please pack them and please bring them along. We're hoping to have a photo opportunity at the GFAN pre-meeting with the white coats and hopefully also carry them inside the summit. And the links for all of our AIDS replenishment briefs and all of our adjoining reading material is also available on this guide. I'm just going to quickly drop the link for the guide in the chat, and in case you have any questions, any add-ons, any clarifications, please do let us know. Thank you.
Thanks, Priyanka. I'm also just going to add the direct link. I missed myself if it's in our guide, but just to note that it is still possible to register to join virtually for colleagues who aren't planning or able to attend in person. I don't believe it gives you access to every single session, but it does give access to a number of sessions on the YouTube channel for the World Health Summit. And I believe that registration is still open. So just thought I'd pop that link in as well. It's probably embedded somewhere in the guide and I missed it myself. But thank you, Priyanka. So we look forward to seeing colleagues who are there in person. We're also, we're excited about a number of different events that we think will help us move sort of conversations forward towards the replenishment and even beyond. Berlin in October is always nice. I'm not sure that it is, but speaking of Berlin, we did just want to give you just a quick sort of update because I know there's always a lot of conversation out there on the sidelines. So to the best of our knowledge and having checked in with some of our German colleagues, we just wanted to quickly mention that it is expected, if you're hearing this, it is expected that at the World Health Summit during the opening session that Germany will pledge to the Global Fund replenishment. Obviously, anything could change. So that is just currently an expectation. But that is, what is, hoped for and expected at this time. It is likely, not for sure, but it is likely to be a reduction from their pledge in GC7. But a lot of advocacy has been focused on supporting the pledge happening and pushing for language in the announcement around at least so that it keeps the door open through the sort of G20 event, pledging event that's planned at the end of November for hopefully an increase to bring that number back up. I know colleagues in Germany have a lot of sort of events and are doing a lot of work internally with their representatives and the members of the board of the Global Fund to try and work on that top up. And I know Priyanka, you've been working with some of those colleagues around some of the ways that we're trying to support with GFANers who are in Berlin to do, video messages and amplify the messages of German colleagues. So if you are going to be on the ground in Berlin, just know that that is the expectation, that there will be a pledge during the opening session. Anything could change. and that colleagues on the ground are still going to be working to try and increase that with the time remaining in the replenishment campaigning, and maybe coming to you with asks on how to help them do that. So I'm going to just pause there for a quick second. We do have Colin mentioning that at least are two of his favorite advocacy words. I'm just going to pause for a second to make sure I didn't miss any critical context to that. I think I've got it before we move on. So now for excitement, I will open it up for quick questions or updates from other colleagues before we move on to the situation in France this week. Are there any questions or comments about the World Health Summit or some of the domestic implications or considerations as you potentially join? No questions today. Okay, that means that we did a good guide and you have the tools and the resources that you need if you're participating in person or virtually to the World Health Summit, and that we've explained what we know. So yay. Patting myself on the back today. It's been quite a week already. So I will give the floor now to some of our French colleagues. I'm not even actually going to try to explain what has happened before passing it over to our French colleagues to explain what has happened this week and hopefully get their sense, early days still, I think, but what the implications of that are for us in the context of the Global Fund replenishment in the immediate term and into the long term. So Leo, I'm going to pass it over to you first, and I think we have other French colleagues, including Alix from Friends of the Global Fund, and perhaps others. But Leo, over to you first.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, everyone. So I'm Leo, working at ED in France. Yeah, the situation is a bit complicated. I'm sorry, I'm a bit sick because of the weather here. So my brain is a bit slow, and this is a complicated matter. So if I forget anything, I see that GHA is in the chat, Friends of the Global Fund Europe also. What happened is that we are in the middle of a political crisis. We had the censorship of the Prime Minister several weeks ago, François Bayrou, by the National Assembly. Then Emmanuel Macron nominated a new Prime Minister. Sébastien Lecornu was the Ministry of Army and Defense. And yeah, he gave his resignation yesterday. No, wait. Are we Wednesday? Yeah, yesterday. So he was in power for 14 hours, which is a new record for the Fifth Republic. So it's really, really short. And he didn't even have the time. It was 2 days ago already. Yeah. He didn't have the time to give his political speech. So, but he was really a relative, like a really close friend of Macron, and was really following the same political line. So it was, of course, something that did not make the consensus in the different political forces in France, because it was just taking the same ministers and do it all over again. So yeah, that create a major instability, and there is currently several scenarios that we are thinking of. There are currently discussions around trying to find a consensus on the budget bill, which is of course the biggest goal right now, is to have a budget for next year, and in particular for the Global Fund. This morning, Sébastien Lecornu, so the leaving Prime Minister, said that the discussions, and I have the quote right here, there is a convergence of political wills for a budget before the end of 2025. So that would mean that there would not be a dissolution of the National Assembly right now, which was the first scenario. So first scenario, there's a new government that is not being censored. It's still a big question mark, because even if the left is the first political group in general at the National Assembly, they don't have the majority, the absolute majority, so they could be censored. The liberal conservative bloc same. It's like it's a bit of three-third. So with the left, the center-right bloc, and far right. So yeah, it's kind of hard right now. The second scenario is the dissolution of the National Assembly, which we thought was going to happen, but now it seems to be a little bit further in terms of scenarios. Don't know really well. And the third scenario is Emmanuel Macron himself resignating. It doesn't seem likely right now, but is also being pushed by former allies, such as Edouard Philippe, former Prime Minister, or Gabriel Attal, former Prime Minister. So it's a bit hard to analyze what's going on in France right now, even if we are in it. There's so many, unknown parts that we need to figure it out. For the Global Fund, we need to keep in mind that Emmanuel Macron is deciding, and Macron is the key player, no one else. So it was quite a good news that we had Le Cornu, because he's like in the right line of Macron, and Macron is the only one who can decide right now for the pledge, because during the discussion of the budget bills, there is not a discussion on what is being funded through, like namely through ODA. So we are going to keep pushing on Emmanuel Macron directly, hoping that somehow it doesn't resign. But yeah, the path towards the end of the year is really, really hard. Right now, it would seem that there would be a slight sign that the government would shift on the left, but it's really, really slight, and it's only based on what the political leaders on the left said. But it's mainly the big discussion is about the pension bill, and if the government, like the Macron's political force, doesn't withdraw the pension bill, that was a huge fight in parliament and also in the streets in France, there would not be any consensus. So yeah, that we are there and we don't know really well what's going to happen. We are, checking the live feed and what's happening, but there will be news all week, and it's going to be have massive impact on what we are doing and the advocacy that we are doing. And if I forgot anything, please help me, French colleagues, to help sort this mess out. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. That is very helpful. But just looking at our colleagues, other colleagues from France, Alix, I think Anna's on as well. I'm not sure who else from GHA. I know I saw some names earlier. Any other comments from colleagues from France before we kind of open it up to a bit of Q&A? No, I think, Leo, you've done it for everyone and explained how little is possible to know at this stage, but that the implication, there's Alix, she does have some more for us to add. So Alix, please come on in. Thank you.
Hi, sorry, I'm not putting the camera on. No, just to flag that maybe the main change since maybe last week is that we did not consider a scenario where France would not pledge at the replenishment, and now with the new situation, it has become an option. That's all.
Really? That's it? That's what you're going to come in with? Thanks, Alix.
Sorry.
No, I'm teasing. No, that is helpful clarity. Patrick?
Don't shoot the messenger.
No, we'll not. Patrick,
thank you, Katie. And after these very positive notes from Alix, just saying also the importance for us with all the political environment that Leo summarized very well. Even for us, it's very difficult to handle that. Anyway, the thing is that the importance for us is to have President Macron attending the meeting in Joburg. Because we had a discussion last week with Peter San saying that it's not sure that he will be attending. And the only way for us to have a pledge for France at Johannesburg, or I don't know if it will be a Johannesburg in South Africa, will be to President Macron to attend. And at that time, it's not sure. That means any pressure that will come from all over the world to him to ask him to be present at the conference, at the meeting will be important.
And that's also why I'm just jumping in. Having the push from the diplomatic network could be really a big push. So ensuring that Macron understand that it would be a betrayal somehow of like his legacy and how he's viewed internationally. We need to make it really a stake for him to understand that he cannot miss this opportunity. And I'm just going to answer the question that has been asked in the chat by Anthony. Does the political turmoil affecting the budget bill impact the contribution of 2022? There is a big impact because we are late. We have only as if I'm paying. France has paid, I think, 3/4 approximately of the contribution, but there are still delays, and they have acted that a part of it would be paid in 2026. I think it's 100 million, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be. So yeah, but it's not directly linked to this budget bill.
Okay. Thank you. That is helpful clarity. Not always welcome clarity, but helpful clarity from colleagues. So very much appreciated. Any other sort of questions or comment around sort of the situation in France or otherwise on the topics that we've explored today in the call? I'm just noting that some colleagues from IDA have shared some events that they're having at the World Health Summit, and we welcome others sort of sharing that. But just taking a pause here for a second to see if there are any questions about what's just been discussed in terms of the situation in France currently, or otherwise before we wrap up our conversation today. If you're struggling to find the hand raise, I welcome you to use the chat to note that you have a question so I can point to you, or unmute and go ahead. Okay, but I am not seeing anyone. Yeah, I am not seeing anyone unmuting or otherwise. And so I think we wanted to share one quick last thing before we do wrap up the call, Conte. So we wanted to share with you, yeah, it's coming up here. But we did just want to share again, sort of, all of the tools that are available to you on GFAN's website around tracking the pledges that do come in. So not currently France's, and telling us if you're engaged at the World Health Summit, sharing over the listserv activities that you may have that you're looking for colleagues to support and amplify around, Global Fund or, global health financing at the World Health Summit. And also just a pitch, as we've mentioned before on previous calls, GFAN is a part of a consortium of organizations, 7 of us, that are leading a project called HERE CSO, which is yet another great acronym, but essentially it's about reimagining the health architecture as civil society and communities together, so that we have, a process amongst civil society and global health to determine what some of our sort of visions for the future of the global health architecture are. And our launch call for that, because it is just a project that's just been really getting underway since it was funded in late August. The launch call is happening right after this. If you haven't received a million emails or notices from us already, then the link is in the chat for you to be able to register for that call. And my understanding is that we are over registrations for the number of lines. So I would welcome you to register and join quickly if you would like to participate in that call. But other than that, I'm just looking to colleagues Priyanka, Contain to jump in if I have missed anything I was meant to mention. And otherwise, we'll let you all go with 10 minutes left in your day, or not in your day necessarily, but in the hour before the next call. So doesn't look like I've missed anything. So thank you everyone for joining today. Thank you to Jennifer, Alana, and our colleagues in France and elsewhere for sharing information today and keeping us up to date. Bon courage to colleagues in France and in Germany, and to everyone attending the World Health Summit. Take good care.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye, everyone.